Good morning. Welcome to episode 84 of Duval Rundown. My name is Gus Logue. Today I'm joined by a very, very special guest. As you guys know, each Wednesday I bring in a national guest to talk about the Jaguars from kind of an outside perspective. Anyone that I bring in, you can trust that I value their opinion, their expertise, their work. I don't know if I'll ever have a guest on the show whose work I value or appreciate more than Aaron Schatz, who's joining me today. He's the creator of DVOA. There's no perfect NFL stat or perfect stat in general, but if you had to use one stat to measure team efficiency, I think DVOA would be pretty much everyone's answer. It stands for defense adjusted value over average. And so it's kind of sort of similar to EPA in that third 3-yard rush would be more valuable on 3rd and 2 than it would be on 1st and 10. But what makes DVOA so great is that it does adjust for opponent strengths or weaknesses. So Aaron, welcome to the show. Thanks very much for joining. And maybe you could tell everyone a little bit about what you're doing with DVOA over at FTN Fantasy now.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for having me. So FTN Fantasy has been my new home now for 2 seasons. And we have all the DVOA numbers, including all the splits based on charting. We do a lot of charting at FTN. And so you can, using our stats hub for subscribers, get DVOA for specific things like against cover 2 defenses or on inside zone runs. And then, of course, we have all the historic numbers, which now go all the way back to 1978. So if you love history, wow, even though history starts in 1995 in Jacksonville, you can go all the way back to 1978 before Jacksonville existed and get all the DVOA numbers with all the play-by-play breakdowns.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure everyone go check out FTN Fantasy for Aaron and his team's work using DVOA to provide analysis on the NFL at large. But obviously, this is a Jaguars podcast, and so I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on the Jaguars, starting out with their free agency class. So far in 2025, they added 9 new free agents on Monday, which is the most of any team on the first day of the tampering/negotiation window in the NFL this year. And so less so like we can get to like 1 or 2 specific signees in a minute, but at a large, what do you think of just like the Jaguars' decision to sign so many guys on day one? Do you think that if we have to put into binary terms, then I think that contenders typically are patient and wait for like the 2nd and 3rd waves to find value. And then non-contenders usually kind of act up in this way and spend a lot of money in the very beginning of free agency to try to get talent onto their roster. But that said, the Jaguars only they had 9 deals, but the most guaranteed money they gave out was $20 million to Patrick Mekari and Jordan Lewis. And so, again, at large, do you think that the Jaguars are kind of acting more as contenders or non-contenders? And just what do you think of Monday?
Oh, clearly non-contenders. Clearly they were just trying to build up the roster with a lot of guys. And that's basically they signed some guys. I mean, the 2 that stand out are the 2 that you mentioned, right? I mean, there were like, hey, here are a couple of depth tight ends, right? Like, I mean, not too exciting, but they filled some holes and they got some depth. And then they got, 2 players that I think stood out as sort of under the radar quality free agents, which is Mekari and Lewis. Now, Mekari was 5th in ESPN's pass block win rate among guards last year, and he has a lot of versatility. He can play pretty much any spot on the offensive line. So when ESPN asked me to do a list of under the radar free agents, he was one of the guys I included, and I think that's a really good signing. Lewis was 14th in my coverage DVOA stat, which measures coverage on every single snap that a defensive back is in coverage. And that's very good. It's better than everyone else on the Jaguars. And it's very clear who the weak link on the Jaguars was last year. It was Montaric Brown. And so this allows them to make Montaric Brown cornerback 4. And the 3 guys that they'll start are much higher. The problem with this is that cornerback stats are incredibly inconsistent from year to year. No matter what stat you use, whether you use yards per target or yards per coverage snap or coverage DVOA or even Pro Football Focus grades, cornerback is a really, really difficult position to measure and predict So we have no idea if Lewis will be good again next year.
Yeah, and as I said on a previous show, I think Lewis is arguably the most talented player that the Jaguars signed on Monday. But there's the fact that you just said where it's cornerback play more than any other position in the NFL is kind of fluky year to year. It makes sense with how we know that defense is generally a lot more fluky than offense, but especially
and it's not just stats, by the way. Think anecdotally to your favorite cornerbacks. I mean, yeah, there's some guys who you think of as shut down every year, but like Campbell, for example, doesn't it seem like it's different every year with him? Antonio Cromartie used to be the same way. Like cornerback is just a very inconsistent position.
Absolutely. Do you think that there are any other positions that, or even names out there that you think the Jaguars should be interested in adding in free agency before we get to some other topics?
I don't have on the tip of my tongue who are sort of the best free agents left. It's obviously what they need primarily is defense, right? They were 31st in defensive DVOA last year. And yeah, we know defense is less consistent than offense, so there's a good chance that there's going to be some regression to the mean there. Absolutely. But like if you said, which side of the ball does Jacksonville need to build on? The answer was defense. And they've mostly signed offensive guys, right? There's Lewis and there's Murray. I wrote down, you said something about 9 guys. I wrote down the names of 6, but the 6 I wrote down, 7, but 5 of those guys were offensive guys. So if they want to sign more free agents, I would go defensive depth.
Now, not just specific to the Jaguars, but just for like any NFL team that's trying to build up their defense. The Jaguars' pass defense was horrific last year, and I think that it can. It's mostly due to the coverage, but they certainly didn't have enough pass rush either. I know that PFF kind of spurred like a pass rush versus pass coverage debate a few years ago, and obviously like the right answer isn't one or the other, but like a mix of both. But if you were, again, not specifically the Jaguars, but an NFL team that had a really poor pass defense, do you think that you would do what the Jaguars did and sign 2 starting caliber defensive backs, or would you look more so to the trenches?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure Eric Murray is a starting caliber defensive back, right? He's only started once out of the last 3 years. I know that Rivers McCown, who's a guy who's written for me both at my old site, Football Outsiders, and for FTN, is a Texans fan and was not too sad to see him go. So I don't know. There's definitely one starting quality defensive back and one guy who's on the edge. I would sign pass rushers. And the reason why is that they're more predictable. My guess is it's a really interesting push and pull, because my guess is that your defensive backs are more important, but your defensive linemen are more predictable. And therefore, you know what you're getting when you sign defensive linemen. But if you're the Jaguars, what you need is rotational guys in interior pass rush. They've got the 2 starting edge guys, right? Like Josh Hines-Allen is very good. And Walker has been pretty good. And he's a number 1 pick, right? Like the potential is still, there that he's going to be outstanding. I don't know how much more time you want to give him to be outstanding, but he's pretty good. But they need backup and rotational guys to get more pass rush.
Absolutely. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Jaguars go about that, especially because their former general manager, Trent Baalke, was straight up arrogant, honestly, in the way that he just did not add pass rush depth behind Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen. And so even though the Jaguars haven't addressed that.
Right. Look at the Bills went out and got Bosa and Michael Hoyt so that they now can go 4 deep, right? They'll start Bosa and Rousseau, and then they'll have Epinesa and Michael Hoyt off the bench. And so, you know, even if you've got really strong starting pass rushers, you want to be able to have that rotational stuff.
Absolutely. I want to shift the conversation a little bit just to like your general thoughts and takes on a few of the big wigs in Jacksonville. So first of all, I assume that you, like everyone else, expected and thought that Doug Peterson should have been let go after the 2024 season, but less so about Doug, more so, what do you think about Liam Cohen? Do you think that he's ready to be an NFL head coach? Did you like what you saw efficiency-wise from his Buccaneers last year? Again, just what your general takes on Liam Cohen, the new Jaguars head coach.
I have a soft spot for Liam Cohen because he got his coaching start at my alma mater, Brown University. He's a Rhode Island guy.
Yeah.
I don't know much about it. We know 2 years, right? We've seen him be an offensive coordinator for 2 years, and one of them was bad and injury wrecked, which means it wasn't really his fault, right? With the Rams, they were 25th in offensive DVOA in 2022, and he wasn't really running the offense, right? McVay runs the offense. So you're really talking about 1 year, which is being 7th last year. That's what the Buccaneers were, and that's great. But you can't really say Liam Cohen is the guy who resuscitated Baker Mayfield's career, because Dave Canales was really the guy who resuscitated Baker Mayfield's career. So I don't really have any strong feelings about whether Liam Cohen can do the job. Right. The other thing we have to remember about guys getting hired as head coaches is top coordinators become top head coaching candidates, but coordinator skills do not necessarily translate to head coaching skills, right? A lot of being a head coach, like, yes, Liam Cohen will run the offense, but a lot of head coaching skill is his general, ability to be the CEO of the entire team and manage the locker room. And we have no idea, none, how good Cohen is at those things. He could be very good at those things. He also could be very bad at those things, and we don't really know which he is.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. It's definitely an open question mark, especially as it relates to kind of more off-field stuff and in the locker room, and the leadership tangibles that he is able to bring or not. But I am personally optimistic that he will be able to turn Trevor Lawrence around, just because even if, as you pointed out, Cohen wasn't necessarily the one to turn Baker Mayfield around, I think that the ecosystems that Trevor Lawrence has played in throughout his NFL career hasn't been super beneficial. And so what do you think about Trevor Lawrence? I mean, if you're like kind of in the middle again, then that's totally understandable. But it seems like there's a lot of people out there that have a really strong take on Lawrence one way or another. So where do you fall on that?
I don't remember who put out this tweet early in the season. I think it was this season. But they said something like, today's game is really exciting. It's a matchup of my two favorite quarterbacks, Josh Allen and the idea of Trevor Lawrence. And that's really what we're at with Trevor Lawrence, right? Lawrence has been an elite quarterback 1 year, 2022. That was it. He was 6th in passing DVOA in 2022, 16th in 2023, and 19th in 2024. But if you talk to the film watchers, they all believe the skills are there, that he has been let down by his situation, by the offensive line, by receivers who are not named Brian Thomas, that he's still, it's not too late for him to reach his potential of greatness. And I feel the same way. I think you sort of separate quarterbacks in the NFL into 3 categories: guys who win for you, guys you win with, and guys you win despite. And I think that Lawrence or Kyler Murray is right now at the bottom of the category of guys who win for you. But he's still in that category.
Yeah.
He's not a win-with quarterback, right? He's not Jared Goff. He's not Brock Purdy. There's those guys have been more productive than Lawrence, but he's got the talent to lift you if you can figure out how to make them come out.
Well, certainly one way to help Trevor Lawrence out is by scheming up Brian Thomas, the electric 23rd overall pick from last year. I'm wondering where you fall on the spectrum of takes in terms of Brian Thomas, because I think on one hand, people can point to him ranking 3rd in the NFL in receiving yards last year, behind only Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, and say, wow, LSU, this guy is incredible. He's going to be like the next great thing. But then on the other hand, like the Jaguars did deal with a lot of various injuries. Brian Thomas is really like the only capable pass catching option for the Jaguars by the second half of the season because of a lot of injuries. And so do you think that the ceiling is, or like, do you think that Brian Thomas's ceiling is limitless, or do you think that we should like slow our brakes a little bit after his amazing rookie year?
I would only slow the brakes because when guys have rookie years that good, they don't often improve because they're already so good that there's no room for improvement. Like there's really very little on the other hand. Our playmaker score wide receiver projection system had Thomas as the number 2 prospect in last year's draft behind Malik Nabers. partly because the two of them had to deal with each other and share the load at LSU. Then Thomas came out. He had the number 9 rookie season since 1978 by my DYAR stat, which is the DVOA, but as a total value rather than as a value per play.
Okay.
He was absolutely outstanding, like historically one of the best rookie wide receiver years, especially if you consider that for 6 or 7 games, he was catching passes from Mac Jones instead of Lawrence, and that he didn't have a lot around him. Like, I am a big Brian Thomas guy. There's very little on the other hand with him.
I was going to say, beyond Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas, is there anyone on the Jaguars' roster, especially on offense, that kind of excites you or even doesn't excite you? Between Brenton Strange, Tank Bigsby, Travis Etienne, I think that Bigsby and Strange especially have a lot of fans in Jacksonville because of the way that they played. But I don't know if they're really that efficient of players and are really looked at as the same regard at a national scope.
Yeah, as a guy who doesn't see a lot of Jaguars games, obviously I watch a lot of football, but there are some teams you see more than others because you can only watch one game at a time. And I haven't seen a lot of Brenton Strange. The numbers don't stand out for him. So if he's like one of these real try hard hustle guys, I don't really know anything about that. But that's great if that's what he is, because then he's maximizing his skill set. That's good.
Yeah.
Neither Bigsby nor Etienne stands out to me as someone special. At the running back position, we know the analytics people very strongly believe that running backs are very closely clustered together, that there aren't a lot of them that are special. But there are some, obviously, like Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. And I don't think the Jaguars guys are those guys, but they don't seem like the opposite either. They don't seem like they're particularly they're not like Javonte Williams, where last year Denver was number one in ESPN's run block win rate and something like 24th in run DVOA because the backs couldn't find the holes that the linemen were making for them. That the Jaguars backs are not like that either. Gabriel Davis, I think we all know what he is, right? Which is that he has talents, but he's inconsistent. So, and then I don't know anything about Parker Washington. Diami Brown is just a dude. Like Diami Brown has basically been replacement level every year. He's just a guy that someone else tweeted out. I think Matt Hinton from Yahoo, that like $10 million is the going rate for guys who have enough talent that you have to sort of know that they're there, but that's about it, because that's like what Tutu Atwell got, and that's what Diami Brown got, and so he's not anything special.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And I think the Jaguars went the right way about that specific contract by just signing him to a 1-year deal.
Yeah.
Obviously, he was a little bit of a playoff hero for Washington last postseason, but you don't want to lean too much on that recency bias. So
same with Gabriel Davis a couple years ago, right?
So. Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Do you have any opinions on like the drafts for the Jaguars, but even beyond the Jaguars, just anything that you're interested in for the draft that's coming up in about 6 or 7 weeks now that you're just looking forward to monitoring, whether it's where the quarterbacks go, where Ted McMillan falls, like how the Jaguars should be aggressive in terms of moving up or moving down?
Ted McMillan is really interesting coming from the New England area. Not that he's coming from the New England area, but that I'm coming from the New England area. And we had a draft pick here a couple of years ago who had very similar skill set, named N'Keal Harry. And that was a massive failure.
Yeah.
And Ted McMillan is essentially a better version of N'Keal Harry, but with a similar skill. He's not a separator, right? He's a catch point guy. And so is he going to get drafted too early? I mean, what do you do with a guy where that's his talents? Is that worth a high first round pick? The top 3 is interesting because will 2 quarterbacks go? There seems to be this feeling a little bit that came out through the combine, talking to other reporters, that Shedeur Sanders is not seen as a top 3 guy. So there's a really good chance that the top 3 is going to be Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, and Travis Hunter in some order.
Right.
Okay. As a Patriots fan, I'm hoping that Sanders is in the top 3 because that would mean Travis Hunter would drop to the Patriots at 4. I can't imagine Travis Hunter getting. I've seen some mocks that have Travis Hunter getting down to 5 or 6. I can't imagine that he's going to get down to 5 or 6. The Jaguars pick 6th, 5th,
right after the Pats.
So, I mean, it's really hard to imagine. Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are the 2 best players in this draft. You would want to hit the Patriots upside the head if they somehow had a chance to get one of those guys at 4 and passed on him. So my guess is that whether the quarterbacks go in the first 2 picks or not, the most likely thing is that only Ward will go, and then Hunter and Carter, and then the Patriots will have 4. Pick something else. I think the Jaguars are in a pick the best player available position, right? They need enough things at enough places that they can take the best player available, period. Whether that is Mason Graham, the Michigan defensive lineman, whether that is a high edge rusher, whether that is an offensive tackle, like they're in a position where they can pick the best player available. The other thing I'll say is there's a general belief among analytics people that it is always better to trade down. You want as many bites of the apple as you can get. And so trading down, you usually gain more draft capital, even though they're lower picks, that the odds of hitting on either a second or a third are better than hitting on a first, for example. I'm just blabbing out there, but you get the basic idea. So given that the Jaguars sort of don't have any very specific, like you need this guy, and given that the 2 really life-changing players are likely to be gone by the time they pick, and they don't need a quarterback, I would think the best thing for them would be to trade down if they can.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It'll be interesting to see like what options are even out there, because I think the 2 best trade down candidates for them would have been just going down 1 or 2 spots to the 6th pick with the Raiders, where they just got Geno Smith.
Yeah, the idea that maybe the Raiders would want to go up 1 in order to get Sanders, but that seems to be, well, I mean, not necessarily, because Smith is 35 years old, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it feels like the Jaguars are going to have to kind of like create some smoke of their own, that there's a lot of interest in Shedeur Sanders. And I think like the only scenario really of them being able to trade down is if the Saints decide to be the Saints and trade up for no reason to get a quarterback from the 9th overall pick. Definitely generally agree, though, with your point that best option would be trading down. And second best option is just like kind of best player available. But since the Patriots do have the pick before the Jaguars, assuming that the order does go in some order, Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, and Travis Hunter off the board in the first 3 picks, do you have like a lean or a prediction or a personal opinion of where?
I think it's more likely that the Patriots go defense with Mike Vrabel as the head coach. There's just a lot of talk that none of these offensive tackles are worth for. I know the Patriots need offensive tackle really bad, but you don't reach for a guy at 4 who's not worth it at 4 if you can get someone better, because the Patriots need pretty much everything. I thought Mason Graham was going to be the pick at 4. Then they signed Milton Williams, but Christian Barmore's blood clot issue is a real question mark. So I still wouldn't be surprised to see Mason Graham be the pick at 4. And then that leaves, that puts probably in the Jaguars in a position where you can get like the second best tackle or the second best edge rusher or the best offensive tackle / guard. You could basically pick anything else that's there.
Yeah, I think it's probably safe to say that the Patriots will probably take the trench player that they like most. And same for the Jaguars.
Yeah, I mean, I know people are thinking offensive trench player. I think it's more likely defensive trench player, but yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, to close out, it doesn't even have to be Jaguars related, but just what's something that you're looking forward to in the 2025 NFL season? Is it the Vrabel and Drake May pairing? Are you interested to see who wins the Geno Smith trade? How the Chiefs are able to rebound after the Super Bowl loss? just one thing.
No, I mean, as a Patriots fan, of course, I'm looking forward to the second year of Drake May, but there really is no Vrabel and Drake May pairing, right? Vrabel doesn't. I mean, he learned offense. That's why he spent the year in Cleveland last year, was to learn offense. But it's really the Josh McDaniels and Drake May pairing. Yeah. The thing I'm looking forward to every year at this point is, when are these great AFC teams going to get over the hump past the Chiefs? Right? Like the story of the year every year is Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. When is one of them? I mean, we did see one of them get past the Chiefs a couple years ago, right? Mm-hmm. But when is one of them going to get past the Chiefs and get into the Super Bowl and finally win a Super Bowl? Those guys, I mean, I think everybody would agree the four best quarterbacks in the AFC, in the NFL are in the AFC, and it's those four guys. Those are the four best quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah.
And three of them don't have Super Bowl rings yet, and two of them have never been. So the biggest story is, when is one of them getting there?
Do you think, we don't have to dive super into like what those three quarterbacks and teams need to do in order to beat the Chiefs, but just generally, do you think that question is more about how great the Chiefs are, or more about like how those other teams need to adapt in order to beat the Chiefs?
I think it's more about the greatness of the Chiefs, and especially their ability. That the fact is that some of what's happened with the Chiefs in close games is luck, but some of it is skill. Mm-hmm. That they don't beat themselves in close games, and that other teams make mistakes. But some of it is luck. I mean, the timing of things for the Ravens, that Jackson had a fumble, that Mark Andrews dropped a couple of passes. Mark Andrews fumbled and then dropped a 2-point conversion. It was really hard against the Bills, their timing, and the fact that the Bills have never been able to get past the Chiefs despite playing very, very well. You look at the Bills and you go, this is a really good all-around team. This is a Super Bowl contender. You look at the Ravens and you say, this is a really good all-around team. Although the Ravens were the healthiest team in the league last year, and they are not going to be the healthiest team in the league next year. It's very unlikely. The Bengals need defense. The Bengals are not a good all-around team. The Bengals are in trouble because they need defense, and they probably have to trade their best defensive player in order to afford their wide receivers, so that they're on a little bit of a different plane than the Bills and Ravens are.
For sure. Well, it'll definitely be exciting to see how the AFC race shapes up.
Notice that none of these teams I mentioned are in the AFC South, though.
That's right.
So the door is open for the Jaguars. Like the Texans, we all thought coming off of 2 years ago that the Texans were, they were headed for they were going to go on a run now of a few years. Mm-hmm. So many things took a step back last year. Obviously, their offensive line imploded. Now they've gotten rid of Tunsil. C.J. Stroud did decline a little bit. Tank Dell is very likely not going to play this year because of injury. Like, the door is open for the Jaguars to win this division. I don't think the door is open for the Jaguars to challenge the Ravens, Bills, and Chiefs for the conference.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But it'll be really interesting to see both this season, but then obviously beyond, not just how the AFC race shakes out, but the AFC South, obviously the Jaguars need to tackle first. But Aaron, I'll let you go. Thank you so much for joining the show and providing your expertise. You can follow Aaron or see his work on @AShotsNFL on social media, or FTN Fantasy.
Yep, I'll mention on Blue Sky, it's aaronshots.com. I have my own URL.
Oh, nice.
And that people should check out FTN. Also, we have great stuff in other sports. I only do the NFL, but we have fantasy advice and picks and projections and DFS optimizers for everything from baseball to golf. So you really want to check out ftnfantasy.com. There's a lot of good stuff there. If you play DFS, if you like to gamble a little bit, we have lots of good advice.
Absolutely. Excuse my dog. It's not just a lot of information, but it's actionable information. And so make sure to check out FTN Fantasy. Make sure to follow Aaron Schatz' work. Aaron, thanks again so much. We will be back here tomorrow at 9:04 a.m. with Mia O'Brien to talk more about Jaguars free agency. But Aaron, have a good offseason. Good luck with Drake May experiment.
Yeah, good luck with getting Lawrence to finally be Lawrence.
Appreciate it. All right, till next time. Thanks, guys.